Before flying out here, I was initially concerned about what the landing would be like because we were going into a soft strip. It's kind of in the middle of the mountains in a valley. Having not flown this before, I just really wasn't sure what it would be like, but I was pretty confident because I was going with a pilot who was considerably more experienced and had actually been to this airport. Getting in was not a big deal. I mean, it was scenic, it was beautiful, weather was nice, we made our turns, lined up on runway 25, and I brought it in for a great soft field landing, basically just following the manual and doing everything by the book. We taxied up, got out, and looked pretty happy and looked like we knew what we were doing. Of course, that gave me a pretty good feeling, and I was feeling confident that the most difficult part of the day was done. What I didn't realize is that the difficult part was yet to come. We actually had trouble leaving. I had to do 2 aborts on takeoff, and after the second abort, we decided to kind of call it for now, park it, and then go deal with what the situation is. Now, my wife at this point was already fairly panicky because, like I said, she's not a fan of flying in general and wasn't happy that we even brought her out here. And I was getting a little bit nervous myself because I wasn't entirely sure why we could not get off the ground. So let's talk about what happened. We taxied over, parked, to do our run-up. This airport has a little bit of a paved patch at the beginning of runway 35 that you can use to put your brakes on, do a run-up, and you can actually do a short field technique. So in other words, you can get full brakes, put full power, wait for the engine power to come up, let the brakes out, roll, and you can also use the soft field technique, which in a Diamond DA40 falls for pulling the stick all the way aft, waiting for the front wheel to come off the ground, kind of maybe bring the stick a little bit forward, keep the wheel off the ground as you accelerate, get the aircraft up into the ground effect, accelerate to your rotate speed, and then do kind of normal best climb, which in Diamond DA40 XLS, there is no VX, there is only a published VY, which is going to be the same whether you're doing 50-foot clearing at the end of the runway or you're just kind of doing normal best climb. Now, at this airport, there are a lot of really tall trees at the end of 2.5, which adds a little bit of an anxiety trying to get out of there. So that was also kind of messing with my mind a little bit. After some deliberation, and while we were talking, other folks came up to us, some folks who live at this airpark, and we all kind of deliberated and talked together about what this could be, why the plane isn't able to get off the ground, double-checked the AFM, made sure that the calculations I did were correct, which they were. So at least on paper we should have no problem getting the plane off and accelerating. But we determined there's going to be a couple of things we're going to do in order to maximize our chances at attempt number 3. The grass was a little bit tall and it hasn't been cut in a while. So one of the gentlemen who lives at the airpark offered to get his lawnmower out and cut the grass. And he kind of said, well, I don't know why I didn't do it before everyone showed up for the barbecue. Let me just go and do that right now. Also, this was a fairly hot day, and this was middle of the day. So the temperature was high. It was about 29-30 degrees Celsius outside. Airport being at 1,000 feet above sea level. We figured density altitude wasn't going to be an issue, but definitely wasn't helping, right? So if it was a little bit cooler, we would get better performance on the aircraft. One of the more extreme things we decided to do was to unload my wife and have her get over to the next airport over that had a paved runway that was also much longer, and meet us there. Ultimately, I don't think it was her fault or the weight of her in the plane. I think I know what the issue was, but we'll get to that in a second. So the other thing I did was, in my mind, make a very clear determination about where I'm gonna abort. The first two runs, I got about halfway down the runway, but between the point when we decided to leave and my very last attempt, I noticed that other aircraft that were leaving, albeit with 2 people on board and good power, were taking off, at least being able to get their main gear off the ground much sooner. So I decided that if I cannot get off the ground by roughly that point, we'll abort and we'll kind of troubleshoot from there. And I was also starting to think about what my plan B would be like who can I call, who has access to an aircraft, can fly in, maybe a CFI who's a friend of mine, maybe one of the other guys we partner in on the plane, someone who just maybe has a little bit more experience, can come in, we can all take a look at the airplane, maybe there is something wrong, and can really go from there. And the very last thing that was kind of running through my mind was, well, is my technique okay? Am I doing the right thing? And in part it was combination of doing a short and soft takeoff at the same time. I was kind of worried a little bit that maybe my rudder work isn't right, maybe I'm dragging the brakes a little bit. So I decided on the next try, I'm gonna really over-exaggerate. I'm gonna get my heels on the floor like I usually do, but I'm gonna pull my toes back and really just make sure that it's just balls of my feet on those points on the pedals, so I'm nowhere near the brakes. And I also decided that the runway isn't really that short, for 2,400 feet, and also observing how other aircraft are taking off. And I decided that I don't really need to do short runway technique. I can just do soft field, and it worked. So once all of this happened, wife on the ground, me and my friend in the plane, we went, did the run-up, and took off no problem. In the video you can see the plane climbing just fine. I think at some point we saw probably somewhere in the 800-foot climb per minute. So overall I would say we had no problems on the third try. This was about 2 hours later, so the temperature actually came down quite a bit. Grass was cut, we were 1 passenger down. So all of these things kind of came together. I was feeling much better as well because I sat around, thought about what I could do maybe better, watched the grass being cut, watched a couple of planes leave. So in my head I was like, this is going to be okay, we'll be successful. What I did do right was abort twice, not try to force it, not try to take off, sit down, think about it. We reasoned through the problem, we found a number of solutions, had help executing on all of them, and were able to leave safely, while keeping in mind that if this attempt does not work, we're not going to force it, we're not going to try to get the plane up in the air and potentially run it into the trees that were at the end of the runway, and we would just get help and go from there. Not end of the world. So once we were out, we landed at the next airport. Our new friend brought my wife, unloaded her, put her back in the Diamond. We did a normal takeoff, which actually is an interesting situation because this airport is used for crosswind training. At least that's kind of when it was constructed. So the runway usually gets pretty strong crosswind. So I got to practice a crosswind landing and a crosswind takeoff, which also worked out just fine. And then flew to Seattle, to Boeing Field, and had an uneventful approach and landing. So with that, hopefully you enjoyed this recap. Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of the video that was a combination of my cell phone, my wife's cell phone, and shooting with Insta360 1R. And you maybe learned something out of this, because I definitely feel like I've learned a ton.